Hi, this is Charlie Minato from halfwheel.com, and this is a review of the Daniel Marshall Signature Series 125 count humidor. Now, Daniel Marshall is one of the preeminent humidor makers in the world and probably the leading humidor maker in the U.S., certainly amongst desktop humidors. He makes his humidors in Los Angeles. He's been doing so since 1982 after getting his start making a wooden box / humidor for Dunhill, which is no longer in the cigar business, but once was one of the more prominent names both for selling cigars at the retail level as well as having their own cigars. And so in the early 80s, he made a humidor that was a little bit smaller than this one that held not only cigars, but also held Dunhill branded whiskey. And he actually brought that humidor back a few years ago and remade it in the modern era. But this particular one is from the Signature Series, which is sort of the main line of Daniel Marshall humidors. These are all high gloss options, so in the wood finish with what the company says is a 1,000 layered look to it. So high gloss lacquer in natural exotic woods. This is burl. There's also the lower end Ambiente series, which I've had a humidor from that series in for well over 5 years now. It's the same internal components as this one. Actually, I have a 125 count Ambiente series as well, but rather than having the high gloss finish, it's got just a flat black look to it. And so that comes in at about half the price compared to this, which is a listed price of $895 for the 125 count model. It measures 14 inches wide, so from here to here, and this is all exterior dimensions, 10 inches from here to here, and then it's 5.5 from the bottom of the humidor to the top. I'm not going to flip this over because there's cigars inside, but the bottom does have felt. So if you open the humidor up, you will see that it's a pretty standard humidor. So this does have a tray that is removable, which is an optional feature for the humidor. But it's a nice feature nonetheless, and I believe this is the smallest humidor that you can get from Daniel Marshall that does have a tray. Anything smaller just has the bottom area. Unlike some other humidors that you're starting to see, there is no slotted area or removable bottom here. It's just a flat bottom box, and then you can see right here and right here, there are the slots to hold the tray up. Same humidor, different camera angle. You will note a couple things. So up front, first of all, there is this lock set. Comes with an included key. As I mentioned with all humidors or desktop humidors that come with locks, that is pretty useless except as a vanity feature. I'm pretty sure that those locks could be picked in no amount of time by anyone that has ever picked a lock. And secondly, you also could just pick up the actual humidor itself and walk away with it. It is not a security measure. Although I guess if you have kids, it's maybe not the worst of ideas. But other than that, wouldn't recommend using that to protect your cigars from outside intruders. The other thing you will note is that is my face. There's a microphone sort of in that area that I'm talking into. And that is because the humidor, the lacquer that is on here is super high gloss. It's so glossy that we are not using any of the lighting that we normally use, any of the external lighting, because it just created way too many highlights. And so it is as glossy, I think, as any humidor that I own. If you're into that, this is the way to go, and certainly I think probably the most affordable option that you can get this type of lacquer from on a humidor today. The other thing about when you have this much lacquer and when it's done this well is that the pattern on the wood actually looks like it's floating off of the wood. So it looks almost holographic in a sense. It's not so obvious on camera, although you can get a little bit of that effect, I'm sure, when you're looking at it. You also note that there is a black line that runs all the way across the edges of the humidor. If you don't like that, and I will admit that's probably not my favorite look, Daniel Marshall has made this humidor before in a limited edition model that's got the wood that just runs all the way across. So if you don't like the black line, there is a way to avoid that. So now I'm going to open up the humidor, and you will see that it's a humidor. And so if you give it a close, you will note that there's a little bit of a soft close feature to it. Yeah. And you also note that there's making a little bit of squeaking sound. As far as how the humidor works, it works great. I've never had an issue with any of my Daniel Marshall humidors as far as keeping humidification. Once they're seasoned, they seem like they're good to go. I've had one for at least 5 years now and don't have any issues with it. It is still here at the office today. And so I wouldn't expect anything different from this one because all of the Daniel Marshall humidors I've ever seen interior-wise have pretty much been the same. They've all got the gold hardware. They all have the same sort of lid, which I'll get to in a second. And all the other ones that I've had here at the office haven't had any issues with them whatsoever. So as far as some complaints that I do have about the humidor, they are all up here in the lid. So you will note on the lid there are 4 different elements. We have right here is some old school technique. It's got numbers 1 to 12. And I think Daniel Marshall and Davidoff are pretty much the only ones that still use this. And so the idea here is that you would mark when you thought you were going to need to service the hygrometer or the humidifier, again. So if you were refilling the humidifier in June, you may want to say, I want to check it again in September. So you would mark the 9, and that would be an indication that, when September comes around, time to check my humidifier. I don't know if anyone's still doing that these days, but I'm sure there's someone. I just haven't met that person. So then in the middle of the humidor, you've got this black box, which contains the hygrometer, the humidifier, not the hygrometer. And so the humidifier you can see is black plastic. So it's nice, I think, in the sense that it's hidden behind the wooden wall with the emblem. I would point out, though, that it doesn't mean you're not going to see any black plastic, because the hygrometer, the hygrometer, the device that's right here, that's got black plastic on it. So it's not like it completely hides your non-all-wood interior. It is magnetic, and that black strap back there is helpful to help get it off in case you need to refill it. And the other part about this, which is nice, is that it can be easily opened up to remove the Florist foam. And the reason why that is nice is because Florist foam really is not something I would recommend using in any humidor at this point. It's an old technology. It's something that was used for many decades and is still used today. It is, anytime you see this green foam-like material, that is Florist foam. It's what they used to use, or I guess they still somewhat use it in flowers, but it was designed to hold water in and sort of do a slower release than if you just had a gigantic amount of water. So you could put flowers, you could literally poke the flowers into the Florist foam, and then they would get a slow constant release of water. And it works in one sense of providing humidity. The only problem with it is that there's no way to control any of the humidity and how much humidity is being let go. So when you see propylene glycol, that solution that they tell you to put on your humidifier, that's not there to actually make it magically work at 70% relative humidity. It's there to do two things. The first of which, and the primary use, is to prevent it from molding. It works to help stop the growth of mold, and it's very effective propylene glycol is at doing that. The second thing that it will do is that it slows down the release of the moisture from the Florist foam, but it doesn't control it. It's not like if you put 1 ounce of propylene glycol on 20 square inches of Florist foam, it will do X. There is no formula quite like that, at least none that I've ever seen. It does slow it down once again, but if your humidor is running at 78%, there is not any amount of propylene glycol that is going to help fix that problem. You're just going to have to take out the humidity element. You're going to have to let your humidor air out a little bit and then hope to go back to it. And so that's why something like beads or Bovedas are a much, much better solution, because there's a much better attempt at trying to get it to that sort of exact number that you want for cigars, which is probably somewhere around 70%. So this is not great, and that would be one problem in and of itself. But the other issue here is that when we look at the humidor, you will note that there's this lip that runs all the way around the humidor, so it protrudes outwards. That's the lip that goes from the bottom of the humidor. It's the highest point of the bottom of the humidor. And then in addition to that lip, and give me 1 second because that black strap is distracting. So in addition to that lip, we've also got the tray back here, and you can see the tray, that's the top of the tray. You will note that there is a pretty decent sized gap, over a ½ inch, I think, probably, between the back of the tray, or the top of the tray, and the top of the lip of the bottom piece of the humidor. And then there's also a decent sized gap between where the top of that the top layer of cigars is and the top of the tray, and then an even bigger one to the top of the lip of the humidor. The reason for that is because this piece right here goes pretty far down. It goes at the very least to the top of where the tray is. It definitely goes well past this lip here. And what's annoying about it, particularly if you're like me, is that your upper portion, your humidifier portion of a Daniel Marshall humidor looks like that, because I'm not using this. And yet all of the space up here where I could put maybe 1 or 2 more rows of cigars goes completely to waste, because the humidor wouldn't close if I put cigars down there. It would get stuck and it would smush the cigars, and we wouldn't be doing anything good and productive. And so on every single Daniel Marshall humidor I just have tons of wasted space. And in a world in which there are only 58 cigars in a humidor that's rated for 125 cigars, another row or 2 of cigars would be great. And I will say there's only 58 cigars in here, but I probably could fit more if I did some Tetris. And some of these cigars are in bags, and some of them aren't the small cigars in the world. But getting to 125 is not going to happen, barring just petite Coronas and serious cigar Tetris. So that's an annoying feature, and it's on every single Daniel Marshall humidor that I own, and I think pretty much in existence. One other thing, because I'm not done yet, is the hygrometer. So the hygrometer, like the humidifier, is removable. You can see over here, I guess this hand's probably easier. So if you see right here, there's a gap. And so that gap, all you need to do is stick something in it and then like a knife, and you can easily pop out the hygrometer. So on this one, my hand can actually fit in. And some of my Daniel Marshall humidors, it's much tighter. And I will give him credit that this seemingly that gap is getting a lot bigger. So this removes, which is nice because then you need to replace the battery. You can do so. The only problem is that these don't really work. I have, I think, 5 different Daniel Marshall humidors here at the office. And I was noticing that the humidity results were pretty wonky compared to the sensor push device that we have in here, which also measures humidity. And so I decided to test them. So I put them through Bovidus 2-step calibration, and I actually thought that one of our calibration units was broken because of how bad the results were. So I would put 2 of these in one of those bags, and I would get 2 just completely different numbers, none of which looked like they were close. In fact, between 3 of the units that I was testing, I got a 20% variance. One of them was running 2% hot, and the other one was running 18% below what it should have been. And if that tells you anything, it's that you probably shouldn't be relying on those for accurate numbers, which is unfortunate because otherwise, it's a very nice standard feature. So the accessories that are included on the lid, aside from those, I would say this is a very good humidor. And whether or not you should buy it comes down to one very simple question, which is, do you like the high gloss lacquer? If you do, then I would say you have 2 options. This humidor is great at $895. It's a pricey investment, but these are going to last for a lifetime. They truly are an heirloom piece, and it's an American-made humidor, which is not something you can say much about, or you can't really compare to, because there's just not a ton of them that are left at this point. So I think this would be an option. I personally would save a little bit more money, and I would wait till I had enough money to buy the Treasure Chest humidor, which is that iconic Daniel Marshall humidor that he's known for. It's also a little bit larger than this, and I just find it to be a much more overall impressive presentation. One of the best and one of the most iconic humidors, if not the most iconic humidor that's ever been made. The other option, if you don't like the high gloss lacquer, would be to get the lower end Ambiente series. And those are about half the price. And interior wise, it's the same thing. It doesn't come with the tray. That would be the one exception. But rather than having the high gloss, you've just got a black flat paint job. And those humidors work great. They look better in certain environments. If I'm being quite honest, they probably look better in our office than something like this does. But this is the classic humidor. When somebody thinks of a humidor, this is what they think of. Dark wood, high amounts of lacquer, about the shoebox size. So I think it's a very, very good humidor for that, and I certainly would recommend it. One other note, if you are in the market for a Daniel Marshall humidor, I would recommend going to Daniel Marshall's website and clicking on the online store under the humidor tab. It's a little bit confusing to get there. They do something called the private stock sale, and so they take humidors that are new humidors, but they have a slight blemish in the lacquer. Maybe something got underneath on the lacquer. Maybe it got scratched. Whatever the case is, they're very minor blemishes, and they knock a fairly large percentage off. I've seen some humidors on there for as much as 50% off. So I think these are probably more likely in the 30 to 40% range in terms of the discount, but that's a ton of money. And it makes these humidors go into a price point that they, at $500, this humidor becomes an excellent, excellent option. At $1,000, it's a little bit tougher. At $900 plus tax, it's a little bit tougher, but at some of those lower price points, it would be very, very tough to beat the Daniel Marshall Signature Series humidor. So if you want to learn more about Daniel Marshall humidors, including a review of that Ambiente series, you can check out halfwheel.com. If you want to learn more about humidors in general, whether it be desktop humidors, travel humidors, big cabinet humidors, we have reviews of all of those things, as well as hygrometers, humidifiers, and everything else to do with cigars. So just check out halfwheel.com.